this process section. What's it in? It's very obvious service.
Okay, it is 3:13, and we're going to call the.
Really, actually.
What do you have on your computer? Oops. Okay, it is 3:08, and we're going to we're calling the Active Transportation Advisory Committee meeting to order. Javier, do you need to do roll call?
Sir.
Okay.
Veronica Escalera Ibarra. Lyle Hustetler.
Second.
Carl Brettmiller.
Here.
Jeff Jordan.
Here.
Cheryl Rogers.
Here.
Lauren Simpson.
Here.
Laura Parker. Or Brandon Ross.
I think Laura's here for Brandon Ross.
Yeah. Joshua Judgeke.
Here.
Vanessa Garza.
Here.
Doug here. Erica Taft. Hilda Capricioso.
So, someone else.
Okay. Bill Hill. Allison Hayward.
Here.
Ryan Clifton.
Here.
Bert McKell. David Bemperad.
Here.
Robert Hanley.
Here.
Karen Bishop.
Here.
Alicia Spence. Yvonne De La Rosa. Marcella Diaz-Wells.
I'm here.
Chair, we got quorum.
Okay, we have a forum. We can move on. Second item on the agenda is citizens to be heard. Joey or Clifton or Javier, do you have any citizens to be heard?
Wilson.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's fixing the agenda, but a micro project that I had the hot spot. And that's the railroad crossing on Bassett.
Okay.
Uh,
Tell you what, let's do this. Frank, let's hold that until we get all the agenda. We'll cover it at the end. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the November 9th, 2022 ATAC meeting minutes. If there's any corrections or modifications, I'll entertain those. And if not, I'll entertain a motion and a second to approve these. Anybody online or in this room that has any corrections or modifications to the committee minutes? Okay, I will entertain a motion and a second to approve the November 9th, 2022 ATAC meeting minutes.
So moved.
Okay, who was that?
Allison Hayward.
Okay, Allison, I got a motion by Allison Hayward and a second. Bert, and a second by Bert Patel. All those in favor, and let me do it a different way because it's online. If there's anybody that opposes it, please signify by either online or in this room with a nay. Okay, hearing none, the minutes are approved for November the 9th. Next item on the agenda is the presentation on green infrastructure opportunities to mitigate roadway pollutants and achieve multiple benefits. And San Antonio River Authority, Karen.
Thank you.
pulling that up. My name is Karen Bishop. I'm a senior supervisor with the San Antonio River Authority. And since 2011, I've been advocating for low impact development in the San Antonio community in the larger region. We, in 2015, got an amendment to the city's Unified Development Code that introduced the concept of low impact development, along with some incentives that the city of San Antonio would award for implementation of low impact development. And the design storm standard, in other words, the amount of stormwater runoff your project would have to be designed to accommodate in order to get those incentives from the city. We've developed a manual for how to design it. We have some modeling tools to enhance the performance of these practices. And so what I'll be talking about today is a general overview of green infrastructure for those of you who are low impact development. I may use those terms interchangeably, or LID or GI. So I'll give a little bit of a primer on what that is and then how it is associated with roadways, some examples, and then discussion. So we can go to the next slide. So the problem is that, like with most urbanized areas in the world, our street network is directly tied by pipe to our streams. So the last few days it's been raining. So all of these streets all through San Antonio and Bexar County have been like wet creek beds. And today it's dry outside, and so they're starting to dry up and they're not trickling to the storm drain inlets like they have been flowing to them in the last few days. And so you can see oil and grease in the top photograph, and then you can see all the sediment. People think, well, that's just dirt. What's the problem with that? Sedimentation is a transport mechanism for bacteria, and most of the stations along the San Antonio River and its tributaries where we're doing stormwater monitoring and river monitoring, bacteria is high. We're actually on the EPA's list of impaired water bodies for bacteria in our basin. And then you see an outfall, a sample outfall. And a lot of our outfalls have been designed to be under the top level of the stream or the river for aesthetic purposes, but they're there. And so whatever is on the street, whatever gets picked up along the street, whatever comes off rooftops, we're right below an overpass on 35. And we've done monitoring here. There's an extremely high amount of bacteria coming off of our roof. So we have 2 big cisterns over there and a rain garden on the other side of the building, and it's managing our stormwater runoff from this building so that it's slowed down, cleaned up, and then sent cleaner and most of the time cooler to the river. Next one. There are several pollutants that are affiliated with stormwater runoff: oil and grease, PAHs, which come off of vehicles, and there are other sources as well. Bacteria, as I've mentioned, metals, with aluminum being a significant material used in vehicles from top to bottom. The structure of vehicles, the tires, the paint even has aluminum. So that's a major source. Sediment, like I mentioned, sedimentation is a major transport of pollutants from the ground to rivers and creeks. Temperature, on a day like today, it's fairly pleasant outside, but the majority of time in San Antonio, we have hot days, we have sunny days. The asphalt, the sidewalks collect the heat, and then if it rains, there is a transport of that heat, thermal pollution, into the rivers, creeks, and streams, and both the sedimentation and the temperature cause fish kills. And then we don't have to worry about that so much here, but road salts. We do on occasion see materials placed on our roads when it's going to be bad. Next slide, please. And so these 3 graphs illustrate relationship between flow which is in blue, and concentrations of certain pollutants on Salado Creek. So the top one is showing a rain event between February 11th and February 13th. I think this was in 2021. And it shows the E. coli, so bacteria. You see that prior to February 11th on the left-hand side, both the flow and the bacteria are relatively low, and then when one spikes, so does the other, and then there's a leveling off. In the middle, you see aluminum. You see the same trend prior to the storm event. The flow and the aluminum levels are consistent. And then when we see this storm event, both peak and then there's a returning, leveling off. And the same at the bottom with the suspended solids. Next slide. So what do we do about that? Well, the first time the River Authority did a test back in 2004 and learned in our southern basin that except in rain events and for about 72 hours afterwards, our basin's water bodies were for the most part within state standards. I had people say we can't control the rain. And I didn't think that that was quite an appropriate response. And so I just kept looking for and listening for opportunities to find a solution. So fast forward to 2010, there was an opportunity to do some research about what other communities were doing to make their watersheds and or their agencies more sustainable. And low impact development or green infrastructure was one of about 12 or 13 different options that we researched. And it is the one that rose to the top and that we got authorization from our board of directors at that time to start pushing forward. So green infrastructure is a set of design tools. It mitigates stormwater runoff, it mitigates street level flooding, and it provides multiple benefits, including improving community health. Traditional infrastructure manages for flooding. The curbs are set to be a certain size, a certain length. The engineers look at how many curb cuts there are. They make calculations about how much flooding can be accommodated by roadways, and they mitigate for that. What's lacking in traditional infrastructure is that water quality piece. It is the multi-benefit piece that you get from green infrastructure. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you see an illustration of a more natural landscaped image. And you see that you get 40% evapotranspiration through the trees and the grasses compared to 30 in a more urbanized area. You only get about 10% runoff. There is still runoff, but it's only about 10% in a undisturbed area. Whereas in a highly urbanized area, it can be as high as 55% runoff. So we're sending all that precious rain out of our community downstream, as well as polluting the rivers that convey it on the way. You see that there's 25% shallow and deep infiltration with a more natural area, undisturbed area, but in an urbanized with traditional infrastructure, that 25 shallow falls to 10, and the deep falls from 25 to 5. That shallow and deep infiltration is where you get recharge from seeps and springs and things along that line. It's where your community holds on to water so that the amount of time it takes for hot weather to dry out your soils and start causing distress amongst your plants, it extends that period. On the right-hand side, everything is going to be exacerbated, as well as the pollution to the rivers, creeks, and streams. So next slide. So how or where within the ground does green infrastructure remove pollutants? Well, in the non-disturbed areas, there's plenty of soils. There's plenty of native grasses with deep roots to mitigate. In an urban area, we can put in green infrastructure, and at the surface level where you have the UV and where you have mulch, you get mitigation for pathogens, which is your bacteria and your oils and greases. For the pathogens, it's in part UV. Then you go down about a foot and you get mitigation for metals and total suspended solids. Go down 2 feet and you get more pathogen. So at that level, you start getting the further breakdown of any bacteria that was not addressed by UV at the surface. And phosphorus and nitrogen, and both of those things are in chemicals that people put on their yards, on their trees, etc. So it takes 2 to 3 feet for those to start. And then that thermal load that I was talking about on a 100-degree day, on an 80-degree day, with the sun blasting on hot asphalt, it takes 4 feet, going down 4 feet of dirt, of soil, for that temperature to be, that heat to be dissipated, and for there not to be a remaining thermal pollution threat to the critters and the rivers, creeks, and streams. All right, next one. So this is just an example on the left-hand side of a traditional roadway and parking lot where you have grates or inlets and you have underground pipes. And so the grates or inlets feed the pipes network, and then from there, the stormwater runoff travels with every pollutant that it's picked up on that surface, including if that planted area, which has been elevated and completely cut off from the potential water source of stormwater runoff. If it's been treated with chemicals, because it is having difficulties, because it's been cut off from its water supply, because it's been mounded, even those chemicals get sent by that pipe to the closest river, creek, or stream. And then on your right-hand side, you show how with the depression, with the ribbon curves instead of curves, with curb cuts, with the layers of soil, you get more mitigation of the pollutants. All right, next slide. And then this is just another example, primarily for those of you who have never heard of green infrastructure before. You see another example here. Green infrastructure imitates the natural flow of water, uses the soils and vegetation. It slows the water flow, sinks it, spreads it. With the slowing, you get less erosion downstream, which is always something that you're trying to do, is prevent erosion. And importantly, treats rainwater as a resource rather than stormwater as a nuisance, flooding and polluting element that your community has to deal with. And it complements great infrastructure. All right, next. So we do have at the River Authority an extensive list of green infrastructure recommendations. This is a slide that I've been sharing with the SA Tomorrow planning groups this year for phase 3 planning, for those of you who are familiar with the SA Tomorrow planning process. And Green Streets is at the top of the list. Green Streets also with that 2015 Unified Development Code amendment that we got passed. If you cannot treat everything on your site to get your points and to get your incentives, the priority is treat your parking lots, treat your roadways. That's the priority, because that's where the majority of pollutants are coming. So it's at the top of our list too. And so here you see an example in San Antonio of a green street. You're getting the mitigation of the pollutants because there's ponding in the depression. That inlet has a lip around it that is elevated, and so you get a slowing down of ponding and a settling of pollutants before there would be overflow later in the storm event beyond the first flush, where all the nastiest of the pollutants come off. You see there are native plants. Native plants have much longer root systems than non-native turf grasses, so you're getting the benefit of those plants in that regard. Plus, some of them are pollinators. You get the aesthetics. You get the sidewalk. You see there's even a little footbridge going across for folks who need to cross. And then you see that there is a bike lane as well. So many benefits to this very adaptable set of design tools. Next. So, I've already started mentioning the multi-benefits. I won't belabor. I think you can understand how if you have more plants, you have more trees, you're going to get the air pollution reduction, healthier environment, etc. Some of these features are relatively low and small, and some of them can be much larger and have a lot more plants. But just as it's been the decades-long accumulation of impervious cover, additional roadways that has led to all this pollution, it's going to take years of adding green infrastructure to mitigate fully for it. So this little BMP, no, do I expect it to clean up the San Antonio River by itself? No. Get multiple of these through the community, strategically through the community, and you can start to see an impact on the rivers, creeks, and stream. Next. So here's another opportunity, which gives yet another benefit. This is called a bump out. There's also called chicanes, and they can be traffic calming devices. You have a wide road, sort of a boulevard type road, and it's known for encouraging speeding. You can treat stormwater with the bump out and the engineered layers, but you also visually narrow that road, and that psychologically propels people to slow their speeds. Also introduces the greenery, the aesthetics, etc. Next. All right, so I've been talking a lot about more naturalized BMPs, and now I'm going to start talking about some that are more proprietary. They're more engineered. You can purchase them and have them tailored to your spot or just dropped in. One is permeable pavement, and it's not just laying the bricks on clay with spaces between them. If you've got clay, you're going to have the sub layers. You're going to have engineered soils or soils brought in. There's also a storage layer for flood mitigation, and then the choke layer that will allow you then to have either go to the storm drain or to protect your neighboring building and other infrastructure. Then in the middle, you see your street side tree well. The trees are in a concrete box, and the water goes in like it would a normal storm drain, but it goes into that concrete box where there's an opportunity for settling out before the runoff then continues on into the storm drain network. And then on the far right, you have a vegetated filter strip. Again, you're sending water across a ribbon curb or through a curb cut instead of a long solid curb into a storage area where there can be slow release, and then over for any overage because of a larger storm, sending it across a grassy swell before it gets to the storm network. Next. And then getting super, super proprietary and engineered, you have things like high flow medias that are on the market now, and they're designed to push, many cubic feet per second through the soil, more than you can with natural soils, and hydrodynamic separators that spin and send the sediments and the pollutants into one chamber. You can buy them so that you can get larger trash sent to yet another chamber, and then the stormwater that's been cleaned up gets sent onto the storm drain. And then you can pair these best practices, 2 or 3 stacked in a train, to get even more mitigation depending upon your site configuration and your right of way and how much room you have. Next. So now I wanted to show you some schematics that we had created at the River Authority, and this is either, and I apologize for not recalling, this is either Roosevelt or it's VFW reimagined crossing the San Antonio River just south of town. If you went toward the top right of the screen, there would be a river bridge going over the river, a vehicular bridge. But what we've done swales with the curb cuts. You can sort of see the little curb cuts there. We've added trees, we've added seating, we've added bike lanes and the ability to make left-hand turn on the bikes across opposing traffic. Aesthetics, shade, cooling. So again, that multi-benefit concept. Next, please. Similar here, we've got a center block crosswalk with the bio swell, which is a type of green infrastructure, low impact development. So you've got curb cuts. It lets the stormwater in, lets it settle, lets it slow down, lets it clean up, cool down, and then it's either connected to your storm network underground through the storm drain system, or there's an outlet, depending upon what it's sized for and the kind of soils. And then you see we have the bike lanes as well. Next. Very, very similar. Next. And then here we have an example with a via bus stop, protected bike lanes, shading, aesthetics, stormwater mitigation. And I think that's it. So this is just a highlight of what green infrastructure, what its role can be in the mitigation of stormwater pollutants. And we have a number of different presentations. This is touched upon several different topics very, very quickly, just to whet your appetite and see what the ATAC's tolerance level is for perhaps more information on this, and or if there is an interest in seeing if this committee would be interested in looking into perhaps encouraging MPO to incorporate points for low impact development, green infrastructure, if it's going to be included in future roadway projects, so that as a sustainability feature, green infrastructure, river, creek, and stream health, and the other benefits are included. I think at this point, stormwater is not a component. Stormwater protection, river protection is not a component.
For the scoring process you're asking about?
For any of your scoring mechanisms or decision matrices or anything along those lines.
Karen, it was good to see this from years ago and how much you've done. Talk about, in other words, we have in the city, this is not New Braunfels or Seguin or Kendall County or Comal, but it's, if you're in the river overlay district, they have to go for mandatory review by San Antonio River Authority. And that's Rio 1, I think, isn't it?
Rio 1,
2, and 3.
and then 4 through 7.
Yeah.
It excludes the downtown, the historic downtown area.
And so basically that's the review, that if you're coming in for development, the recommendations will be made by Sarah to do that. And it used to be that everybody was saying it was so much more expensive to do the lead natural channel design protocol to the manual that y'all developed, but it's gotten where it's almost fairly equal, and it's just about stormwater and stuff like this. So the question really is, how would you see this being added to the scoring of projects? On the Rio districts, it's already there and it's encouraged, but outside of that, as we grow on the periphery of the city.
So, and I'm going to add a little bit more to that.
Okay.
Yes, if you are building in one of the 6 Rio districts and you're immediately abutting the San Antonio River or San Pedro Creek, you are required to do low impact development. Now, on the West Side Creeks, in the 2022 code modification that just got approved by council, there's a new water quality district because of all the work that's getting ready to be done on the West Side Creeks project.
And you're talking about the Alazan and the Apache Creeks. Okay.
San Pedro and Martinez.
Right.
Yes. And then if you're up over the recharge zone, you have to mitigate. for stormwater pollution, for protection of the aquifer. And the best practices are very similar there that I've been talking about, except for there is a mandated liner up there for further protection of the drinking water. So, you know, it could be in any number of ways. It could be an extra points thing, at least at first, until people's comfort level with green infrastructure being considered and until there's more of it in the community. So it could be extra points, or it could be, you know, a lot of the president's funding is now requiring sustainability and resiliency, and green infrastructure is increasingly being directly mentioned at the White House. So it could be that, you know, a certain amount of points under the resiliency or under the required sustainability segments be specifically tied to green infrastructure. So it's not just air quality, or it's not just pedestrian safety, or it's not just, you know, whatever, that you incorporate the stormwater mitigation. So it could be done a number of ways.
Well, let me ask this for Joey and Clifton. You know, to get that in there, obviously it would have to go to TAC, and then it'd have to be approved by the Transportation Policy Board. Is there any state or federal requirements that would prohibit us making a change or a scoring, something like that? And I really don't have that knowledge base that y'all do.
I don't think there's
I don't think there's anything preventing it. I think the problem is we think you don't have enough expertise to be able to implement that type of thing to our scoring process. It really reminds me a lot of complete streets, because with the newest infrastructure, I'll talk about some today, we're required to do complete streets planning. And so if we don't have complete streets policies and programs and plans in place, then we have to basically commit so much of our planning dollars to that. But to me, this would be a good idea for a PWP study, you know, similarly as to what we're going to do with complete streets, to build a, you know, design framework or design a network with complete streets. We could, you know, make those design standards for, you know, green infrastructure.
Do it in one fell swoop and call it complete green streets, because there are a lot out there. The rest of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're also going through our resiliency study, which I don't know if you're aware of that, Karen, or if you've been looped in on any of those calls, but yeah, we've done our data call recently, so we'll exchange info, make sure that we can get that information to you, but it's just underway right now. But I think that would be another good end to introduce this. But we're just talking, the managers at AAMPO were talking, and we're looking for other studies on which to spend our money. So this could be a potential candidate, and we're going to start creating ideas for UPWP soon, and that might be a good, even if it's not a lot of money, it can be a good investment in figuring out what exactly AAMPO can do, both now and near future, to implement green infrastructure.
And let's
Go ahead.
just to add on to that too, I think I see all the environmental and sustainability benefits of this. I guess in the transportation mindset too, is like, as a cyclist and pedestrian, we deal with often like raging streams of water on the side of the street when you're trying to bike when it's raining. And it's all how I think the Green Street concepts, like the image you showed, they have no curbs. But look at that one image had like
They have saw-through curves in some cases.
Yeah, you can either have
So-
curb cuts or you can have ribbon curbs.
okay, because look at that one picture, it was like just like a seamless
Mhm.
curb with same height as a roadway. So like my mind's like, you know, there wouldn't be as much water or drainage going on in the bike lanes. That's often, you know, bike lanes that are on the roadway usually have water running through it or debris. And even with pedestrians, when you're trying to cross the street, there's oftentimes like a stream of water running in front of you. So I'm thinking so in terms of like the reliability aspects, resiliency aspects of bike ped infrastructure is like, that can help out big time, because bikes, cyclists, and pedestrians still get around when it's raining. So that's, you know, one thing that comes to mind in addition to all the environmental and sustainability benefits.
And Clifton, just to get clarification for Theron's benefit, is it to get this on a study? This is when you have a call for projects to fund, and then it would be incumbent on San Antonio River Authority to say, we want to submit for a study of how you incorporate some of the concepts Karen presented today into a scoring initiative.
That's one way to do it. The track I would recommend and the one I was thinking of is our UPWP process. And so that's where we go through a process to develop our 2-year work program. And that's where we designate where our planning funds go. And so things that we have funded.
Separate product.
Yes. it's
Yeah,
separate.
but isn't that still a
Yeah.
call? You're calling people to ask for that, or is that something you initiate projects?
So we were just talking about this. So our director was talking about it. In the past, we have had calls for studies for
Yeah.
UPWP, but it's been more informal recently. So we don't usually advertise or do like a call for it, but
Yeah, I got it.
we do get some community input, the TAC knows about it, they know about the development, and so we work with them to get ideas, so they're kind of our transportation, I guess, for that, so, yeah, but UPWP, would be someone's process. So we have funded STBG studies before, and those would go into our UPWP and just be funded by STBG, but this is a little bit easier process,
But
less competitive.
one aspect we mentioned, like for the additional points we'll talk about in a minute, is the transportation alternatives project call coming up. And so maybe that's something where, like we talked about, we can kind of ease into it where, like, say, maybe there's action points if there's being some sort of low impact developments being implemented in this project. So maybe that's something where, we can say like that's, providing resiliency to the roadway infrastructure, providing more reliability for pedestrians and cyclists moving about. So maybe that's something where it's like, we can provide more like action points and ease into that process, since we're gonna be talking about that today too.
Excellent.
Good.
So that's something we can consider.
Okay. We talked here in the conference room. Or is there anybody that's online on the WebEx that has any comments or questions on this presentation?
This is
Identify yourself.
Ryan Flipson. Just want a point of clarification with respect to, I think I had heard that.
Your microphone?
Not sure how to turn the volume up
You
on the
did better.
microphone. Okay.
It's better.
Okay. I guess I'm just speaking louder.
Thank you.
Great presentation, Karen. As a wheelchair user, obviously concerned about and have experienced, I think you mentioned the curb cuts, and I just wanted to clarify the point wasn't to have the water flow down a curb cut or through a curb cut where it'd be a little bit more treacherous for me to navigate on a curb cut in my wheelchair. I don't know if you could speak to that or clarify that. It made it sound like the water flow was going to be going down a curb cut where I'd be transversing, to go across the street or whatever.
Yeah, okay, so curb cuts of two different kinds. Can we go back to the image that showed one of the swell images near the end? So low impact development projects have been done incorrectly because people in the field have thought that this curb cut right here was supposed to be this one. This would not be negatively impacted. The curb cuts for ADA access would remain the same. We're talking about curb cuts that bring stormwater into this system right here. And then in a city like San Antonio, it would almost 99.9, if not 100% of the time, be tapped into the street storm drain network. So it wouldn't be coming in here and then coming back out here. If the slope of the road was down toward me, it would be going in through all these curb cuts right through here, being slowed down and then infiltrated and then sent cleaner, cooler, and slower into the storm drain network. And if that didn't answer your question, let me know.
And Karen, what'd you say? Sorry, that's almost like mid-block in some cases too. You try to integrate it where it's maybe the curb cuts are mid-block, not the intersections.
Yeah, you can do it mid-block, you can do it near the end of the block. We were just thinking sometimes if you have an elderly population and they have to use public transportation or they have to walk a lot, or a mother with a stroller or a father with a stroller, a nice benefit might be a mid-block respite with seating and a shade tree, and go ahead and manage stormwater while you're at it.
Ryan, go ahead and your follow-up. I think you got cut off. Go ahead.
No, that answered my question. It was the clarification of the two different types of curb cuts, the one for the water and the one for pedestrians and wheelchair users like myself. Perfect. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Robert, Karen, I got a couple of questions. And you and I have talked about this multiple times. But I just wanted to, one, thank you again to see the updated renderings. I really love seeing the bus and the bike lanes going behind it. That's really, really exciting. One thing that I love about that rendering, and one of the other ones, I believe the one right before it, is showing the bioswale separating the car traffic from the bike traffic. Incorporating that into more would be really, really great. So that's just kind of a comment. My first question for you, Karen, is something that we've run into in multiple cities in the San Antonio region is engineers being worried about safety and liability. That by having, ribbon curves or these consistent curb cuts to allow water flow, they're not as structurally sound, and that they're going to be more damaged or impacted by car traffic or car use. Do you have a set of strategies, or have you got any experience convincing engineers and showing them data that this is in fact every bit as safe and totally acceptable?
There is a national standard of how to design green infrastructure for roadways. And when we have locally been challenged, either about, oh, there's going to be too much water underground that's going to impact the stability of my sidewalks or what have you, we've gone to that federal standard and have provided that information, and then the road project moves forward as we've hoped. So I would say that there are a lot of case studies out there. There are a lot of pilot projects. There are a lot of pilot projects that have been in the ground for a long time. And that's a new one actually for me, David, that the curb cuts would cause the structural integrity of the road to be weaker.
They always think of something. But Karen, if you could please send along that federal standard, I'd sincerely appreciate it. That'd be really great.
Will.
Thank you. Thank you. Then my other question is for Clifton and Joey. Clifton, to your point earlier about, technical expertise in order to successfully evaluate whether a project has, green infrastructure, stormwater benefits. Does the current scoring process of AAMPO allow for an outside organization to provide technical expertise on scoring? Could Sarah be included in the scoring process for some of these coming up transportation alternatives funding sources?
Yeah, and David, that's just kind of part of our technical scoring process in general. I think that's where, Karen and Sarah would kind of provide, the expertise for some high level scoring for green infrastructure. I think as Joey mentioned, the easiest avenue would probably be some bonus points. So we did bonus points for STBG and CMAQ projects. We did them for certain project types last time, but they were included in the overall scoring for bike ped projects, but for other types of projects, they were bonus points. And so that's something we've done in the past, and it's not a big deal. I think this would be a good candidate for that. But that influence would come from the ATAC helping us develop the project scoring criteria in more detail.
Great, thanks.
Sir.
Anybody else online that has a comment or question on Karen's presentation?
This is Michael Sharp with City of Seguin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Mike.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to one topic about the structural integrity of the roadway. And I think where the concern lies is that water in the bioswale has a chance to migrate not to the storm drain that lets it out into its watershed, ultimate watershed, but under the road structure, which then over time could weaken the subgrade and weaken the pavement structure. So I think I'm a big proponent of bioswales and of green design because I think it reduces heat island effect and it provides a benefit to the residents in the community in terms of additional shade and just for more enjoyable experience in your downtown environment. But what I think you have to do to placate the engineer who's worried about the structural reliability of the roadway is build something into the design of this bioswale that prevents that migration.
Yeah.
It has to be some sort of impermeable barrier. Then the concern is that the water gets out of that basin so it doesn't become anaerobic. And there are regions in this nation that use very similar ways to approach this same challenge.
And I think the San Antonio River Basin Lid Manual has a couple or three different options. Fabric, plates,
Right.
et cetera. So yes.
I think that would alleviate
Depends on,
concerns.
Michael, doesn't it also depend on your curb profile? If it's a curb and gutter, after you're 6 or 8 inches, the
Right.
waters can get underneath it. But if you do the deeper standalone curb, that helps prevent some of that migration.
That is one way to prevent the migration. I don't disagree with that. It's just getting the curb deep enough into below the road structure itself into subgrade.
Yeah. So I guess the thing at some point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, is do a cost benefit analysis of a deeper curb section that's not a curb and gutter versus what Karen said is in the current living manual, which is a fabric or a permeable fabric of some sort.
And the best thing about bioretention is over time, if you do it off street and just in property in right of way, is it becomes it sort of self-maintains. You don't have to do a whole lot, and now you've got a nice landscape area. So we saw a lot of benefit of that in the DC region. I think Houston also is promoting a lot of the bioswales in this green design.
You're correct.
Thank you.
They're using a high flow media there to mitigate not only for water quality, but importantly for them, flood control. Get that
Right.
water off that surface.
Yep.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else online? Comments or questions?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was an information item. There's no action to be taken on this. If you have subsequent, after you've thought about the presentations, feel free to submit any comments to Joey, and he can distribute them to Karen at San Antonio River Authority. Okay. No more. Item number 5 is the election of the ATAC co-chair. Joey?
Yes, thank you, Robert. And good afternoon again, everybody. So this afternoon, we'll be talking about the co-chair opening for ATAC. If you go to the next slide, please. So as you all kind of know, every 2 years, ATAC elects a co-chair from its current membership, and this goes through some of the fine details from our bylaws here. And so essentially, there's 2 co-chairs. Robert's here as a co-chair. He's representing the pedestrian community, and then the other co-chair technically kind of represents more the interests of the cycling or micromobility community. And then typically, the co-chairs alternate leading the ATAC meetings. So back when we were just getting ATAC formed, Robert was elected in March 2022. We've had a couple of different co-chairs for the cycling and micromobility co-chair position. Recently, JD Simpson was the most recent co-chair, and she changed positions at her organization, SAV Cycle. So she is not on ATAC anymore. So that's how this position opened up as of December 2022. So we're talking today about this opening for the co-chair position representing the bicycling and or micromobility community. So at this time, we're looking for nominations from the committee. You can either nominate yourself or possibly nominate another co-chair member or another ATAC member to fill the remainder of the unexpired co-chair term. So that is going to be until March 2024. And once again, this will be representing the cycling and or micromobility community.
Joey, do you need to share with the committee members of what efforts you've made to identify potential candidates as to their interest in serving in this position or not?
In terms of this background?
So yeah, because you actually contacted some people.
Yeah, so contacted some folks who may have some interests, who have also identified interest in the past. So as I mentioned, we've had a few, this is our 3rd co-chair election within a year now. So we've had some folks in the past who said they were interested. I know some of the folks that called at the time were maybe on the fence. I think one person reached out, Lauren Simsick reached out, said she is interested in the position. And that's about it for now. Of course, I guess add a couple more points here, not in the slides, but in the past, ATAC has nominate the co-chair to sit on our technical advisory committee. So that's like our committee, the next step up from our ATAC committee. So we have two positions or two people from ATAC sitting on TAC. And so in the past, ATAC has nominated our co-chairs to be on there. It's kind of an unofficial thing since it's not in our bylaws at the moment. So more than likely, next month, once we get the election of the co-chair, consider the person to fill in for tax. So just that's another thing to keep in mind is that typically the co-chair has sat on our technical advisory committee, which meets on the first Friday of the month at 1:30 p.m.
And text.
At the TxDOT headquarters, or the TxDOT district headquarters, and is also a hybrid meeting too. So just want to preface that as well. We'll be discussing that the next month more than likely, but
And I think what I'd like to share is that when we elected the original co-chair last year, within a short period of time, realized they had a conflict of interest with the stakeholder group they were representing in the city. And so they had to resign that position because of the conflict, since you're a voting member on the Technical Advisory Committee.
exactly, inside.
And ATAC and TAC, but
And
that person, and then you're sitting there with either your boss or your supervisor, and you're representing the bicycles, and they're not, anyway, it just, there's some very slightly delicate things depending on what organization you represent when you're serving on the Technical Advisory Committee.
Because I guess just with that point, you said you're, as a co-chair, of course, like any leadership of the committee, you're leading the committee. And in this case too, you're going to TAC as a member of, as a co-chair of ATAC, you're going to TAC and saying, okay, like, because oftentimes how our process works, say for instance, if ATAC were to say, hey, we want to say that we want to have more green infrastructure in our consideration of the MPO, and that proposal would go from ATAC. ATAC can approve that, then it goes on to TAC, and then it goes on to our board. So essentially, as co-chairs, you kind of help communicate those processes and what the committee wants to see be done, or through your decision making. So I just want to add that in as well.
No, it's just, it's a funny little thing, nuance of being a co-chair.
So at this time, let's go back to the last slide on here. I guess at this moment, if there's any nominations, as I mentioned, there's some considerations who stated their interest in the past. So at this time, if there's any nominations for the floor, please go ahead and speak up. Or you're still interested as well.
Yes. So I thought of some qualifications that might explain why I'm putting myself forward for this position. My focus for the past 4 years or so has been active transportation, safety, ADA access. It's something I did for the city of San Antonio, and now something I'm doing for the city of New Braunfels as their transportation planner. So it's just something that I care about. I feel like being a cycling chair would help me to further that even more.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to be nominated or considered for this co-chair position? There's anybody else take motion?
Yeah. Since there's no other nomination, I'll take a motion to recommend Lauren for the co-chair.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I didn't catch that. You catch that, Javier? Who made the motion? Oh, David. And the second was, oh, Karen Bishop. Okay. With that said, I'm going to do it the same way we did the last action item. If there's anybody that opposes the motion in the second, well, it'd be nice to have your cameras on. Isn't that right?
It's a rule, yes.
It's a rule.
Open meeting act rule.
Yeah. So if you got your cameras on, I'll turn them on for the vote, according to
Texas Open Meeting, the Texas Open Meeting.
Texas Open Meetings Act. I'm just so glad you're here, Joey.
Try to follow the rules.
So anyway, Anybody oppose the nomination and the second? Hearing none, we're gonna approve Lauren for this position. All right. All right, next item on the agenda is number 6, the discussion and appropriate action on future AMPO calls for project, and this is Clifton and Joey. Okay.
All right, so I have to apologize. It looks like I accidentally cut off my slides. There's a few that are missing from the front, but I think I can explain everything from memory because I've given this presentation a few dozen times at this point.
Is that
But
memory?
my name is Clifton. I'm the Transportation Planning Program Manager at AMPO. I'm helping Joey with the ATAC project call. I'll be running the CMAC project call. Awesome. So basically the project call, I think we discussed this a few months ago at our last meeting. Every 2 years, we update our transportation improvement program, which is our 4-year short-term plan of projects. And we do a call for projects most of the time in order to select projects for our TA, CMAC, and STBG funding. So this time we had a little bit different process. Instead of having an STBG portion to the call, we just added some extra STBG funds we got from the bipartisan infrastructure law and added those to existing projects in order to let those go to construction faster because we were seeing a lot of cost increases and inflationary increases last year. And so we successfully completed that. Those amendments are going to be submitted to TxDOT soon for approval for some projects in 23 and 24, but we are still holding separate TA and CMAC project calls. So last time, for the first time ever, we had multiple funding sources go for a project call, and we also had all those submitted through one call. And so this time we're going to break them back out again. And so we're going to do TA and CMAC separately. And so I'll go over the basics of the project call and then the CMAC portion, talk about the scoring criteria that I'm proposing we use for CMAC, and then Joey will get more into detail, obviously with this group on the TA project call. So we have several types of projects in the TIP. This is just kind of a generalization of all of them. And so the ones highlighted in green are typically projects, they can be funded with STBG, but they are also usually, they are more typically funded with CMAC dollars, or these are eligible for CMAC dollars. We also have in blue our pedestrian bicycle projects. So TA is it started out as a special program of the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, specifically for bike and ped projects, but now it's standalone program. So now that we have these two separate funding calls, this is one of several funding categories that we have in the Transportation Improvement Program. These are all TxDOT's funding categories on the screen. The ones highlighted in red are MPO funds. So we have categories 5 and 9, which are CMAC and TA. And I grayed out category 7 because those are not being up for a project call this year. But all of these that receive this funding from TxDOT have to be in our short-term transportation improvement program. And so the ones 5, 7, and 9 are ones that we fund as the MPO. And so those are the ones that we get to pick projects for. So again, an overview, CMAC is because we are a non-attainment area for Bexar County. And since Bexar County is the only part of our region that is non-attainment for ozone, it's the only region where we can spend those CMAC dollars. And it focuses on emissions benefits. I'll talk about more how this call will focus more on those type of benefits. Transportation alternatives, again, is for bike and ped projects that are open to the public. And with STBG, you have a lot of flexibility. You can do whatever you want, and it's not like that with TA or CMAC. So for TA, again, it's only bike ped. We do have the option of funding CMAC or bike ped projects with CMAC funds, but I'm going to go over a recommendation to change that for this project call. Here's the schedule for the project call, just to give you all a heads up if you're thinking about submitting a CMAC or a bike ped project. So we're going to information and action with y'all this month and next month. We'll be presenting information to TAC and TPB in March, and then in April we'll go to them for action. Our tentative start date, and again, this has to be approved by y'all and by TAC and TPB. But we're looking at starting May 1st. holding information workshops in May also to give you a better idea of how to apply for funding. And then May through June, you'll work on your submittal. We are, just a note, in case you didn't know already, we're kind of doing this in not unison, but we're kind of trying to avoid stepping on TxDOT's toes because they're also having a statewide transportation alternatives call. And so we're coordinating with them to the extent that we can, while still getting these projects in time for our 25 through 28 tip. And so we really need to get those settled by the end of the year. And so we're kind of waiting for them to finish their process. And so if you are submitting, just in general, be aware, if you're submitting for the TxDOT call, we're not going to award you funding if you get awarded state funding, basically. So just keep that in mind. And then, so just bear that in mind. And so the submittals will be due for us August 1st. And I believe that's when the TxDOT project call will be wrapping up, and they'll take those recommendations to the Texas Transportation Committee. So we'll just be starting our submittal process whenever they're wrapping things up, hopefully. We'll have some workshops in September of 2023 with both you and with the TAC working group to score those projects based on the criteria you develop with us. And then in October, we'll do our public involvement for those. So we'll take those scored projects out to the public and get their feedback on them. December, we will be looking at selection and approval by y'all of the TA and the CMAQ funded project lists. And so we're really trying to get those in so we can include them in the May 2024 adoption of the 25 through 28 tip. So with CMAQ, I was just going to cover this real quick and then I'll hand it over to Joey for TA. But I really want us to look at an alternative where we reprioritize our existing CMAQ project list. The way we selected it previously is by looking at the emissions benefits, but we do have some projects that are kind of low on emissions benefits. And so we're not going to be removing funding from any projects, but for everything that's submitted, I just want to get a good grasp on where it ranks in terms of providing those emissions benefits. So going back to, I mentioned ozone non-attainment earlier. So for transportation conformity, we had to run a test of our computer model, our computer simulation that we used to develop our long-range plan. We have to run that and send some of those results to TTI, and they do an air quality analysis of our model. And so we weren't able to pass the test that we had to pass outright. We had to use our CMAQ projects, those emissions benefit projections that we get that are listed in the tip. We had to use those actually to show, hey, if we include these CMAQ projects, we get below the mark for air quality, and we're in attainment, or not attainment, we're in conformity. So it'd be great if we're in attainment. So that's part of the reason I want to kind of prioritize the list. Something else is, you know, like I mentioned earlier, bike-ped projects are eligible for CMAQ dollars, but they typically run pretty low in terms of emissions benefits. And so we did receive an influx of TA funding and basically doubled our TA funding per year with the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed last year. And so I'm recommending that we move any CMAQ bike-ped projects over to TA to kind of start with a clean slate for CMAQ. And so that should give us some more money to provide more benefits for air quality to the region. So the performance measures we're looking at for this are emissions reduction again, and then traffic congestion. So all of these fall under what we call our PM3 or system performance. Our system performance measures. And so emissions reductions for each project, whenever you submit it for CMAQ, you put in your project information into a calculator and it spits out the amount of NOx and VOCs that project produces, and NOx and VOCs together produce ozone. And so we have an idea of the estimate of the number of emissions a project is going to reduce. And so basically, we'll use this number to provide some kind of scoring metric for those CMAQ projects. So we did that by just the pure benefits because it spits it out in pounds per day. And then we weighted it to the cost of the project to kind of give, you know, smaller projects that produce a lot of benefits, give them a little bit of a boost. We also have some traffic congestion performance measures that we need to incorporate into the process. So one is non-SOV travel. So basically we look at the American Community Survey data for our region and see how many people are traveling by non-SOV methods. We have a performance measure to increase that number, or at least keep it the same. And then peak hour excessive delay, it's pretty complicated, but it's basically how many hours of how many hours does the average person spend in traffic, in the peak period, as if compared to if there wasn't any traffic at all. Hopefully that makes sense. But we're kind of looking at how to incorporate those two measures into the scoring process. And so what I'm kind of recommending initially is, oh, sorry, Joey just brought up that not everybody might know what a non-SOV is. So SOV is the industry term for single occupant vehicle, so basically driving alone. And so if we're able to carpool, it offsets a lot of emissions by being able to ride the bus, carpool, or ride your bike, obviously, or walk. So thanks, Joey. So kind of my initial recommendation is that we, originally in the last project call, we just did straight emissions reductions, 50-50 total emissions and 50% cost weighted. So I'm proposing that we do the same methodology, but we have 70% of the points allocated to emissions reductions, with the majority of that being total emissions reduced. So I would push more for like a 55% in total, but we can do a 50-50 split of that too. And then traffic congestion, we're going to reserve 30% of the points for those traffic congestion measures, and I think we should split them equally. So that will be a new scoring criteria for the project call. So again, these CMAQ performance measures are required by the BIL to be used in our project selection and programming process. So are there any questions on the CMAQ project call or the scoring proposal? Any questions online? Okay. All right, so I'm going to pass it off to Joey and he'll give a similar explanation of what we're proposing for TA scoring.
All right, so good afternoon once again. So to mention, TA is short for transportation alternatives. And as Clifton mentioned earlier, this is focused on bike pedestrian projects. So something that's different we're proposing for this year is looking at, so essentially when we took a look at scoring past years, we just had one scoring sheet for all TA project types. So that includes projects that were on street and even projects that were off street, like maybe local or regional trails and whatnots. So one thing we're also looking at is, depending on the roadway classification, looking at how we're integrating the FHWA, the Federal Highways Administration proven safety countermeasures, and how to consider those for possibly an increase or decrease in the project scope. So some of us know, like, not every roadway type is the same. We'll talk a little bit about the different classifications of roads. So that's one thing we're looking at, is kind of looking at the different classification of roadways and how, if they're looking at, if somebody's looking at putting a project along these roadways, what type of facility will be most appropriate? And essentially, in our case, it's like, what type of facility do you want to invest in the most in terms of like protection and comfort and whatnot? So other things we're talking about too is I mentioned some terms like bicycle infrastructure reliability. So that could, yeah, can you move the box, please? So that could be things like bike signals or signal priorities, or even for pedestrian infrastructure reliability. Similar thing with pedestrian signals, leading pedestrian intervals. So you may have seen different areas where there's bike signals that give you priority without having to press a button. So you roll up to a side, roll to the intersection, and then it detects that it tells the traffic signal infrastructure that, hey, somebody is here, and it gives you that priority. Similar thing with pedestrian infrastructure. So there's some technology that gives pedestrians the right of way without having to press a button. And there's also leading pedestrian intervals, which in many cases allows the pedestrian at an intersection to have more time before the light changes. So looking at things like that to maybe prioritize cyclists and pedestrians more in our roadways. Also looking at using the FHWA bikeway selection guide. I believe this was released back in like 2020 or so, so a little bit around our last project call. So looking at integrating this into some of our scoring criteria. And of course, as Clifton mentioned, trying to take more complete streets focus, using an increase in safety and comfort towards that complete streets goal, especially as, we want to meet these goals, but we also have this requirement from the federal government and the bipartisan infrastructure law to focus on complete streets with this 2.5% allocation of our planning funds. So some of our other considerations we're trying to take into account as we're taking a fresh look at our transportation alternatives project call. So next thing here, still trying to flush this out a little bit here, but essentially it's kind of a, I just realized I should have put the percentage sign next to all my numbers here. So essentially this is looking at the percentage of focus each of these different roadway types will have for these different transportation alternatives project scoring categories. So essentially, if you take a scoring sheet for a project that comes through, we'll take a look at how it addresses safety and comfort, how it services high activity generators, congestion reduction, and how it improves system connectivity and reduction of barriers, and then how it addresses access for EJ populations or cases, EJ references to environmental justice populations. So I'll go and talk more about what these scoring categories mean in the coming slides. But essentially, this is kind of a rough draft look at how we're trying to take into account for things like a principal arterial, which is larger roadway, it's a little more high speed. Should we take into account the safety and comforts of our users more? And these different cases. So it's like, do we put a sidewalk with no buffer next to a frontage road or something? Just thinking of that sort of situation where, yes, there's a sidewalk, but what kind of comfort is there? What kind of protection is there for the person using that infrastructure? So try and take that into account, the scoring criteria, because I think in the past we have heard some questions from some of our transportation alternatives working group members that maybe we should take a fresh look at how we look at this, because things like off-street infrastructure, trails, is different from roadway infrastructure. So that's where some of this is coming from. And so going through some of these project scoring categories, so the safety and comfort focus takes into account the facility type. So for instance, there's different types of bike lanes. Is it a protected bike lane, a buffered bike lane, or a painted bike lane on the street without any buffer or protection? We also take a look at, of course, similar perspective for pedestrian infrastructure. And how are we taking a look at, the other part of this is taking a look at crash rates for fatal and serious injuries in the area. And the next is service of high activity generators and congestion reduction. So essentially, you're putting this infrastructure, what is it servicing in the area? So is it, how widely will it use? In many cases, maybe there's infrastructure in place and somebody's upgrading it to make it safer and comfortable for people in the area to use. Many cases, maybe there's a couple of schools on this corridor, churches, there's maybe apartment complexes, maybe there's a bus stops or bus transfer station near the area. So thinking of those kind of considerations, and essentially we'll be scaling down from there in terms of the most uses it serves versus maybe more minimal uses it serves. And so the next is improving system connectivity and reducing barriers in infrastructure. So what this means is making connections or upgrades to existing infrastructure. So maybe they're connecting bike lanes to each other. So some parts, bike lanes are implemented as they can. So maybe this entity is looking at adding to the bicycle network coverage in their area, or upgrading that existing bicycle infrastructure, similar with sidewalk networks, and adding to existing sidewalk networks or upgrading those as well. And of course, taking into consideration if these proposed upgrades or new projects are included in an existing plan, whether it be an MPO plan or your local plan, your local city or county or state district. Also, the next one is focus on addressing access for EJ populations. So again, this is focused on environmental justice populations. So as this project or connected to both or either the minority and or low income environmental justice areas. So if you're not familiar, environmental justice is a term we use at the MPO. It's a federal designated term. And do a lot of tracking. So like we have information about this on our website, on our maps as well. So this is the focus we have to focus on, the MPO. So make sure we're addressing and providing access and improving access to where it should be for many of these communities. And so that's a summary of where we're at the moment. We were supposed to have a TA working group meeting during the whole regional winter ice freeze going on recently. We had to cancel that meeting. Otherwise, we would have met with our TA working group to kind of flush out some of these questions and propose ideas. We're at this moment right now, we didn't get a schedule in time for our ATAC meeting. But essentially, at this moment, this is where we're at in terms of the CMAC and TA project calls. Does anybody have any questions about either the TA or CMAC project calls?
Can you go back to the split on the CMAC, how you did 70-30 versus 50-50 from the previous year? Can you explain that again on what your reasoning was for weighting heavier the emissions reduction versus the traffic congestion?
Yeah, I think the rationale for that, so previously with our CMAC project call, we just used the emissions reduction. So both the total emissions reduced and then the cost weighted reduction. So that was basically 50-50, and that's the only thing we used. We were put on an FHWA list that required us to do additional CMAC performance measures. So we've had to track not only emissions reductions, but also these traffic congestion performance measures. And so my rationale was kind of that the emissions reductions help us meet our non-attainment goals and help us to go into transportation conformity, basically show that we are following what we need to do to follow the air quality, the Clean Air Act, as far as transportation conformity goes. So it's not that they're more important, it's just it has a little bit more bearing on the type of projects that we need to be putting in the tip. For traffic congestion, we just have to show that the process addresses those things. So that's why we're adding them, and that's why it's a little bit smaller piece of the pie, so to speak, because the emissions reductions directly helped us get into conformity for the most recent plan. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I was thinking that you had, that I understand now that traffic congestion is a new criteria that was added. It wasn't 50-50 between emissions reduction and traffic congestion. It was only emissions reduction.
Yeah, we started developing these performance measures for the region after the last project call, or it probably would have been included too, but.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to address Carl's question. He asked about, I guess, EJ data from areas outside of Bear County, and our EJ data does cover our entire study area. So that, of course, includes Bear, Comal, Guadalupe, and a portion of Kendall County. Yeah, so is that, Dave, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Joey. I had a quick question. I saw on the scoring for TA that implementations along major arterials was scored more highly, if I'm mistaken in reading that chart a while back. The reason I ask is that sounds great, and you spoke quite a bit, and really excited to hear about improving comfort and safety, especially along the more difficult to ride roadways for cyclists and pedestrians. How are we going to make sure that the proposed piece of infrastructure along a major arterial is appropriate for a major arterial? Because we've all seen a dearth of really great, not great striped bike lanes along 50-mile gravel roads. Finding a way to implement safe infrastructure there would be awesome and deserve that extra scoring. How can we make sure as committee, and y'all make sure that as AAMPO staff, that the stuff that's being proposed is actually safe along a major arterial?
Yeah, so I guess a couple questions too. Or a couple answers to this. I want to make sure to reiterate too, like, so the scoring matrix, it all, those different percentages. And so the scoring totals will be the same across the categories, just different weights per scoring criteria. And as for that, so that's where taking into account, you know, like I mentioned, like for instance, the bikeway selection guide from FHWA, in other sources as well. Again, we're still working out some of the fine tuning elements, taking a look at these project scoring process. But that's what we're also considering, because I know that the bikeway selection guide takes into account, roadway volumes and also different things like, considerations for the roadway types. And of course, like I mentioned earlier too, is like making sure that we're providing an appropriate protection and comfort for the active transportation user along these different corridors. So if there's something else that you think that we should be considering, we're definitely open to that too, in terms of like some sort of guidance. We're trying to take all that we can. And also, as for the projects we receive, I must say too, like, we go up with the project information that we receive from entities, and we also take into, so that, includes information like, hopefully it has information about what type of infrastructure it's going to be providing. So that level of what kind of bike lanes are going to be, what type of sidewalk is it going to be. So hopefully we get good information too. And also I think that goes into our project readiness aspect. So in terms of like an entity, like how far along are they in the project preparation process? So have they done some of their public engagement efforts, or how far along are they in their design? So it's going to weigh on some of that as well in terms of, so the focus on how we're scoring it with the backup from data, other resources we're using to score it, but also hopefully we're going to be pushing for good information, like good project readiness. We're pushing for that as well.
Yeah, and kind of build up that, what I've directed Joey to do is look at some of those resources like the bikeway selection guide, different FHO resources on complete streets, because what we want to get eventually is kind of a complete streets framework for what kind of context sensitive design solutions we can throw into the region. So in the past, under safety and comfort, we did have facility type was one criteria, and kind of what I've instructed Joey to do and what we're going to work with the work group on is to kind of develop a matrix of facility types, and then I guess roadway types or off-road, such as a bike path, and what type of bike facility is most appropriate for that. So if you're applying for a bike facility along the principal arterial, you'll get more points for like a cycle track or a curb separated bike lane. But you'll get a lot less points if it's just a sharrow or a painted bike lane with no separation. And obviously, as you go down to minor arterial collector, you'll get a little bit more points for those, I guess, lighter solutions when it comes to context sensitive solutions. And so we're really just trying to figure out a way to build that out a little bit more, because in the past we just listed things like bike lane and 6-foot sidewalks, but we're going to add another dimension to that with the type of facility that that bike improvement is going to be built upon. And so off-street facilities will have a totally different, it'll still have safety factors in there, but it'll be a little bit different than projects that will be on street. So does that make sense to you, David?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I want to flag that Carl has his hand raised in case y'all can't see it in the.
Okay.
Thanks, David. I just lowered it, but yeah, I just wanted to. I think Clifton cleared up, but I just wanted to go back to the slide and address your point, because the way that I had read it was that what Clifton just explained, which was that safety and comfort will be more of a factor for major arterials. So the situation that you're describing, the bike lane on Bandera or whatever, striped bike lane, isn't going to get a lot of points. Yeah. And then my other question around this, because I haven't actually looked at the call, is AAMPO going to be classifying these, or are these going to be like self-classified in terms of, or are they going to use some other designations in terms of what's principal arterial or what's minor arterial?
Yeah, that's a good question. We'll definitely kind of be, I guess, taking the steering wheel on that. You will probably know, or your project sponsor will probably know what type of facility that is, but we'll provide guidance on what facility type you're applying for. So you'll know if it's a principal or minor arterial before we accept your submittal, basically. So we either provide a map or a resource to do that, or just work with you directly to make sure that happens. So on that too. Yeah, and we have GIS resources. Joey mentioned IMAP. which will probably direct you to see what your functional classification is. Because that dark blue along the top is basically the generalized version of the functional classification of facilities. And so principal arterials would be something like Bandera, or I think we're going to group in, like interstate frontage roads or freeway frontage roads, and the principal arterials too. Minor arterial would be a smaller facility. Collector is almost just one step up from a neighborhood street. So that's kind of the context that we're looking at on that side of the graph. But yeah, we'll definitely have a good resource available for project sponsors when they do the submittal to determine that. And we'll check your work too, in case, just in case.
Any other questions? If not, if you see this, we'll get this. We realize this was not included in the package, so we'll get this sent out. And if you have any other questions or comments, you can email Clifton or myself. We'll be working on this and updating this information. So please reach out to us. It's an ongoing process. And yeah, just keep us posted about any questions or concerns you got.
Okay. There was no action required on agenda item 6, so we'll now move to agenda item 7, presentation on the Alamo Area National Bike Month. And Joey, that's yours too, bud.
Yes. So some of you are probably familiar with this from mostly similar information from our Bike Month meeting, and should be listening. Yeah, let's see. Those should have been. So this is presented some of this information over at oh gosh, okay. Well, okay, oh my gosh. So okay, we do not have the presentation with us, I think. So okay, anyway, in that case, try to pivot here. So on this past Friday, we had a Bike Month working group meeting. And so essentially, some of y'all may not be familiar, but so every month, every day is National Bike Month, and the Alamo AAMPO has been coordinating Bike Month efforts in our region for the past almost like 5 years or so. And so essentially that includes getting folks together to think about hosting Bike Month events, or in our case, we're coordinating events across the region for Bike to Work Day. So essentially what that means is that for Bike to Work Day, it's encouraging folks who maybe are on the fence about giving Bike to Work or biking to work a shot. And also there's lots of folks out there who are ready to bike to work. So it's also giving them a pat on the back and saying kudos to them for doing it, and giving folks kudos all around, because we want more people biking to work for the pure fun it is, but also in our case, there's lots of great transportation benefits for reducing traffic congestion and a whole bunch of other environmental, health benefits, and everything else. So our focus is trying to get more people on bikes and biking to work on May 19th, 2023. And our part in that is trying to get folks together to sign up and say, hey, we want to host a Bike to Work Day Energizer station. And so what that is, people stop by on their way to work. There's different spots across our region, and it's all community and volunteer led. So we rely on our partners. Some of the folks are here in the room are on ATAC, who've done this in the past. So thank y'all. I hope y'all do it again. I know some of you already said yes, so thank y'all. But essentially, people bike to work, stop by these Energizer stations, grab some breakfast, grab some goodie bags. We often have a cool giveaway item. Essentially, it's just a fun day to get people to bike to work, give it a shot. And so at that point, so in the past, we've had good density around like downtown San Antonio. We've had a station at the medical center in San Antonio and at Brooks. In the past, there's been a Bike to Work Day Energizer station in New Braunfels. So we'd love to see the area get filled out even more. And so we also realize that, try to consider spots that, maybe a little more bikeable in some places, like, some areas like usually the city centers, a little more comfortable for folks to bike in if there's not already bike infrastructure. So, try to give that a shot for folks. And a lot of people, Bike to Work Day is still a new thing for them. So it's, doing this year after year, get folks to catch on and give it a shot. We also know that some folks are maybe working from home more now too. So still a fun time to get folks to, maybe it's take a break in their work from home routine, bike over to the Energizer station and have some fun. Some folks in the past have even hosted yoga, different stretching exercises, pretty much have a whole party at their Energizer station. So there's all that going on. So I'll send out this presentation afterward with more information about this. I also have a recording from our work group meeting recently. I'll send that out as well. But also for Bike Month in general, it's the entire month of May. MPO wise, we have a MPO, or actually it's Alamo Commutes Challenge. So if you're not already using the Alamo Commutes app, it's a good reason to download the app. And if you're already using something like Strava or one of the ride tracking apps, you can easily sync your trips and have a chance to win some gift card prizes during Bike Month. And you can record any bike trip, because usually for Alamo Commutes app, it's supposed to be like a commute trip. But during Bike Month, we take any bike trips and it can be entered to win some great gift cards. So there's that going on, but there's also a bunch of other great Bike Month events happening throughout the month of May. I think on May 7th is National Ride a Bike Day. So that's kind of a newer event from the League of American Bicyclists, just promoting biking anywhere for recreation, or just biking to work, or biking to the grocery store, or whatever it may be. But for May 7th, it's just to have fun and do that. So it's a good opportunity for folks to also get involved, maybe host an event then. There's also Bike Enroll to School Day. I think that's May 3rd. So also another great opportunity, maybe get involved in your local schools, could be elementary, middle, high school, or even colleges, to get involved and think about biking to school. And there's also a bunch of other community events happening. So in the past, local nonprofits or local governments have hosted Bike Month events. So, maybe it's attracting people to your new bike infrastructure, maybe it's a new trail or something, maybe it's hosting an event there, encouraging people to hop on a bike, and also, of course, bike safety. Realize that, building more bike infrastructure is key, but also getting folks acquainted with commuting by bike, riding a bike, wearing a helmet properly, having lights on your bike, things like that is really important. So there's lots of those conversations going on. MPO, we will still be doing that during time. As our capacity allows, we'll go out and table at events if you have those. I know past years we try to go all across the study area when possible to table at different events in the area. I have to say there's one cool event last year that was really neat in Seguin. I think it's like an annual event actually. There's like a bike giveaway for a bunch of children. It was a huge, massive event. So it's awesome to see areas like that have huge bike giveaways. I think it was sponsored by the police department and fire department. So lots of things going across the region. New Braunfels does a bunch of stuff too. Love to connect with places like Bernie, Shirts, other areas to get more things on the calendar. So again, I'll be sending out more information about this, PowerPoint, and then we also have a website. We'll be updating the websites with the appropriate graphics and registration forms, but we'll get that all updated and sent out to y'all. So essentially, what y'all can do is help spread the word. And if you and your entity want to do something for Bike Month, again, like focusing on the commute side or just, recreation side, just getting folks to think about biking, safe biking, and having fun with it too. You can talk to us and we can figure something out. I think there's also lots of nonprofits in the area who help out and put on some Bike Month events as well. So we can also link y'all up as well. So again, my apologies. My mishap for not bringing the presentation with us, but we'll get that information out to y'all. In the meantime, do y'all have any questions about Bike Month and Bike to Work Day and all the fun stuff that Bike Month is?
Thank you, Joey. The next item on the agenda is announcements and future agenda items. And Frank, we're almost at the end. We'll get to you under other. Okay.
If I can make a couple of these announcements, maybe I can pull up the. Yeah. So I'm going to pull up a graphic in a minute. So as we're a FHWA focused approach to safety MPO, so essentially that means that we're partnering with the Federal Highway Administration to get more resources to help us essentially hopefully improve our crash rates over time, because we have a disproportionate amount of pedestrian crashes in our area. And so one of those aspects is we're going to be hosting a training session tentatively on March 21st and 22nd. We've got a couple locations tentatively pinned down, different locations, but I'm trying to get the same location for both days. But what I'm asking for you is with this QR code, we'll also get the link and put it in the chat box as well. But essentially, we want to hear from you what you want to see in this training session. So it'll be 2 full-day training sessions. We might be able to split your registration into those particular days. But we want to see what kind of information you want to see in this training session. So it's designing for pedestrian safety 201 and pedestrian and bicyclist signals training. So with this survey, we want to see what kind of information you want to see. It's going to be taught by Federal Highway Administration trainers. So I'm going to be flying down here to San Antonio. So love to see your participation and involvement. And tentatively, we have 21st, I believe, scheduled at the ACOG office, the 22nd at the VIA office. We're trying to get scheduled at both days at the same place, but there's some schedule conflicts in the area. But if you don't do this now, I'll send the link out to y'all later so we can get your interest in the training and in the training topics, so we can get it scheduled and make that happen. Also, street skills. We actually had to change the date for street skills. It's gonna be on March 1st. You can still use the same link to register for that or share it with the people in your area. Be at our office once again, giving out bike helmets and lights with that too. And don't want to spill text thunder, but I also included in here for the San Antonio District Bicycle Plan Survey. So I know they're still collecting survey responses for their bicycle plan. So I heard there's 4 different plans going on. So it'd be great to see the San Antonio area on top in terms of survey responses. And that's all for me. If anybody else has any other announcements, go ahead.
Okay, everybody that's on the line and got comments, let me take a guest that signed in. Frank, you have the floor now. You wanted something that you wanted to address to this committee.
I have a particular situation that I think I would like to bring to people's attention and maybe have something done about it.
Okay.
You can see what you think. It's the railroad crossing on Bassett, going from, I guess, West Bassett to East Bassett. It has absolutely nothing on the side, whereas, for example, on the east side, it's rather wide shoulder that narrows to nothing as you cross the tracks. And later on, it's still not good going to McCullough, but I passed that route very many times. And it's the classic situation where you try to avoid the vehicular traffic, but are forced into the stream of the traffic in order to cross some barrier. And it seems as though it would be a fairly easy fix with a little bit of asphalt, but that would be for someone else to look at. It's one of those micro projects that I think would add a lot, at least for me. I mean, east-west corridors are not that plentiful here. I know it's always a problem with east to west. Bassett is not a good street to ride on, but this is a particular problem that I think something could be done about.
I appreciate that, Frank.
So
I'm sorry to
how
make,
I bring that to their attention, whether I put
yeah,
that problem.
and sorry to make you wait till the end. I'm not sure, Clifton or Joey, if y'all know, but anything that you do on the tracks, you have to go through CMS.
Yeah, any project that requires railroad coordination, we just kind of add 2 years to it. The more we hear from our partner agencies about developing projects near railroads and railroad right of way, it's just a big coordination problem. But we are doing a freight study pretty soon, so we'll be working on the request for proposal for that in the next few months, and so hopefully that will commence later this year. But we are looking at railroad grade crossings. Grade crossings is a primary focus of that freight study. So I'll take a note of that, and then I'll put it in our public involvement tracking system.
And is there anything I should do?
Or I guess
Promote that?
I guess because we can't take any action on it because it's not agendized, but I know we have a few City of San Antonio folks on here. Can we somebody from the city of San Antonio, can we connect Frank with you regarding this topic?
Absolutely. If I can get his contact info, I can reach out to him.
I'm sorry, Vanessa, can you say that, or a little bit louder?
Little
If I
louder.
can get Frank's contact information, I can.
Okay, we'll connect y'all.
Okay.
Thank you. And is anybody else? I saw a couple of hands go up earlier. Does anybody else have any announcements? Yvonne had her hand up, and then we'll, Yvonne, go ahead.
Yvonne, your voice, your mic might be off. You're muted, it shows. Yep, there you go.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay. Joey, thank you for the announcement for the bike plan. And I just wanted to reiterate that we do have bike needs survey out there. And I know that Joey added it to the agenda and the link is there. So if you click on it, it'll get you right to the survey. And just wanted to highlight that the survey does close by February 20. And if you know of any bike organizations or even, you know, someone that is interested in bicycling, you could share that link with them so we could try to get as much input as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bert, I saw you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Eric.
You're coming here. Go ahead, Bert.
I apologize for my hoarseness, my sore voice. I would say almost a year ago, this forum was encouraged by the American Vault Sport Association, the folks that now live in Southtown. Well, starting next week, they're going to have their Olympiad translation. You're going to see people from about 65 different countries coming into the United States just to watch in San Antonio. They have the Olympiad in various locations every year almost. This time, Texas is hosting it. So I know through the Mayor's Council, we put out dates, but just if you see that, folks are, you know, it's more of a tourist thing. But I just wanted to say they're going to be using the sidewalks.
Bert, can you get that information to Joey so he can broadcast it out to the ATAC
Sure.
members? Thank you.
Yeah, Eric.
Eric, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. So just wanting to introduce myself to those who don't know who I am. I'm Eric Cleveland. I work out of Congressman Henry Cuellar's office here in San Antonio. So if y'all have any inquiries regarding, you know, anything with the federal government with grants or any kind of zoning or codes that y'all may need to follow on the federal level, please reach out to me and I'll see how I can facilitate y'all's inquiry. On top of that, I do have some stuff coming down the pipeline soon, nothing definitive as of yet, that I would like to collaborate with AAMPO on, if I could connect with y'all offline at a later time, so I could keep y'all informed as to what's going on as well.
Thank you for introducing yourself, Eric.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. We're a little bit later than we like to be, but we had a slow start. With that said, it is now 4:52 and this ATAC committee is adjourned. Thank you all very much for participating and help us get our action items addressed today. See you next month.